Good afternoon and welcome to, can you believe it, the last Quest Club meeting for this year. It's the April 26, 2024 meeting, and welcome to all. Corey Klosterman, I had it right. Corey Klosterman will give the invocation. Corey.
The Trees by Philip Larkin. The trees are coming into leaf, like something almost being said. The recent buds relax and spread. Their greenness is a kind of grief. Is it that they are born again and that we grow old? No, they die too. Their yearly trick of looking new is written down in rings of grain. Yet still the unresting castles thresh in full-grown thickness every May. Last year is dead, they seem to say. Begin afresh, afresh, afresh. I'm struck by the line, the greenness is a kind of grief. There's a juxtaposition there, right? There's this extreme contrast between the greenness of new life and the inherent grief of the passage of time. There's one more winter that we won't have again. I'm excited to learn about Viktor Frankl today, or more about Viktor Frankl today. He might remind us that death is not something in the future, but it is happening now. Guys, I came here to be the downer. Sorry about that. Each season, each day brings new life, but it also marks the cessation of life, right? It's a painful truth, the poem reads, written down in the rings of the tree. So I would say let's soak in this wonderful weather, this wonderful talk, this wonderful day. And if we should catch ourselves wishing for the warmth of summer on an unexpectedly chilly spring day, let us remind ourselves that we're wishing away the present, whether it's just a day or even a season of life. And we never want to do that. So instead, let's use as a reminder to cherish the moment and to make the most out of every season of life. As the poem would say, begin afresh, afresh, afresh. And I'll close with a prayer that Viktor Frankl might appreciate. Dear God, your will, nothing more, nothing less, nothing else. Amen.
Well, it's time to hear about Viktor Frankl, or Frankl, however we pronounce it. Susan wrote this, and it's very touching. Susan Trent wears many hats, and she likes it that way. Her newest hat is managing partner of the Rothberg law firm. She takes pride in her work. She tries very hard to be kind, gratitude-filled, and sunny in disposition, and so very much loves her family and friends, and those characteristics that Susan tries to achieve are characteristics that we all know she has and freely gives. Susan hates bugs and prefers dogs over cats until the universal cat distribution system gave her a stray cat as an augment to her 17-year-old dog on Valentine's Day of this year, and Susan was subsequently adopted forthwith. She is proud to report that she's overcome her species prejudice and spoils them both with abandon. Susan enjoys toasted English muffins with butter and raspberry jam with coffee each morning for breakfast. Her happy place is a warm beach with her toes wiggling in the sand and a good book, or a morning run with her beastie. She has crested a half-century in age, but feels half as many years. She's a person of faith. In terms of 2024, the Trent kids have all decided to graduate this spring, one from Indiana University Bloomington and one from Canterbury High School. The nest is emptying. The future is here. Susan wanted to provide a bit of a caveat about her paper. The beginning might seem, according to her, a bit off topic, but give it a chance, she says. The best thing about Quest Club, aside from the members, and I think we'll all agree with this, is that you get a topic, research it, and make it your own. It might be a flop, but Viktor Frankl is amazing. Susan?
It is easy to ignore that we are all, right now, right here, sitting smack dab in the vastness of the universe, while spinning on the axis of our own little blue and green orb at 1,000 miles per hour. A sphere that, if circumnavigated by car without stopping and ignoring oceans, deserts, and mountains for 24 hours a day at 60 miles per hour, would result in a 17-day road trip. As we look into the night sky, we see the moon, seemingly close, but in reality, 238,000 miles away, such that if we took a similar road trip to the moon without stopping, it would take 6 months to reach it. While only 12 men have walked the surface of our moon, we have penetrated interstellar space through Voyager 1, a space probe, traveling 38,000 miles per hour since its launch on September 5th, 1977. Voyager 1, incidentally, holds 2 golden records containing such sounds as whale calls, the music of Chuck Berry, and greetings in 55 languages, an attempt to communicate in a neighborly manner with whoever else may be out there in the cosmos. Voyager 1 is currently over 15 billion miles away from home. Our little spherical home is also hurtling around our own particular life-giving star, the sun, within which 1 million planets the size of Earth would fit. A similar road trip to the sun would take 177 years. To reach the outer border of our solar system, it would take us 1.5 years traveling at the speed of light, 186,282 miles per second. The next nearest star to our solar system we'd reach in 6,675 years, or, in keeping with the road trip analogy, 47 million years by car. Our solar system is contained within the Milky Way galaxy, along with hundreds of billions of other stars and even more planets and moons. A light year is the distance that an object would travel in a year at the speed of light. The Milky Way galaxy is 120,000 light years across. By analogy, if the Earth were the size of a quarter, the Milky Way galaxy would be 5,000 miles across. The galaxy nearest to our own Milky Way is another 2.5 million light years away. The observable universe, that which contains all of the observable galaxies, is 93 billion light years in all directions. To give some perspective, if you placed a single grain of sand on the tip of your finger, extended your arm, and looked through the grain of sand would block tens of thousands of galaxies in the observable universe from your view. There are more stars in the heavens than grains of sand on Earth. Now consider this. Some scientists believe that the universe, including that beyond what we can see, is at least 250 times larger than the observable universe, and may still be growing due to the unfettered acceleration of space. The existence and passage of time makes us even smaller. Some scientists say that the universe is 14 billion years old, and that life on Earth has existed for about 4 billion years, which would mean that the universe has been around no less than 3.5 times longer than all life. Even Genesis creationists would posit that the Earth is roughly 6,000 years old, and might further estimate that at least 300 generations of mankind have walked the Earth since its creation. Our brief average lifespan is at its apex in length in terms of the history of the world, but still only 77.5 years. Now consider global human population over time. There are currently about 8 billion people alive today, and scientists estimate that 117 billion humans over the course of 192,000 years of human existence have lived and died. Indeed, most of us will be forgotten by the living in 2 generations. Even the physical mass of an individual human body continues to decrease over time. We are now generally shorter, lighter, and smaller boned than our ancestors were 100,000 years ago, most noticeably in the last 10,000 years. And so, it is within this context that humanity has looked up to the heavens and boldly asked, what is the meaning of life? Some have answered. Aristotle said that happiness is the meaning and purpose of life, the whole aim and end of human existence. Schopenhauer said that the meaning of life is to deny it. Kierkegaard, that the meaning of life is to obey God passionately. Nietzsche, that the meaning of life is the will to power. Tolstoy, that the meaning of life lies in a kind of irrational knowledge called faith. Freud, that the meaning of life is simply an illusion. That is also the very question that Dr. Viktor Frankl considered and profoundly reconceptualized by focusing on meaning itself, even as he experienced the worst of human depravity, death, suffering, grief, fear, and loss. With a lifetime that spanned most of the 20th century, Frankl is most known for surviving the Holocaust, but in reality, this represented a short period in his long life. Prior to entering the camps at 37 years old, he had practiced as a psychiatrist and neurologist, with a focus in the treatment of suicidal patients. Departing from Freud, he had also developed his own psychology theory called logotherapy, Greek for healing through meaning. He was convinced that the psychologist's purpose was to help their patients find meaning in life. As a teenager, Frankl was so interested in psychology that he began taking adult night classes when he was in junior high school. He studied philosophy and learned hypnosis at the age of 15. Frankl had his first article published when he was 18 and again at 22. He lectured extensively on the meaning of life. In 1930, at the age of 25, Frankl organized free youth counseling centers in Vienna and successfully combated the epidemic of teen suicides, death rates that spiked around the time of report cards. Within a year of opening the clinics, suicide rates dropped to 0. Frankl's views about meaning were distinct from both Sigmund Freud and Alfred Adler, the fathers of modern psychology. As a teenager, Frankl communicated with Freud and attended Adler's school briefly. Crudely summarized, Freud focused on unconscious motivation for behavior, while Adler focused on social motives for behavior, such as the feeling of inferiority in childhood. Frankl considered an existential, spiritual approach, and in his early 20s, sought to improve upon the ideas of Freud and Adler. From 1933 to 1937, Frankl practiced at the Steinhoff Psychiatric Hospital, where he was in charge of the pavilion for suicidal women. While at Steinhoff, he annually treated no less than 3,000 patients. In 1937, Frankl embarked on private practice. However, with the Nazi invasion, his private practice was significantly curtailed. In 1940, he began practicing at Rothschild's Hospital as head of the neurology department, the only hospital in Vienna that continued to admit Jews. Frankl met his first wife, Tilly Grosser, a nurse at Rothschild's Hospital, in 1941. At this point, Frankl had considerable professional recognition, and as a result, was able to secure visas to escape Vienna with his wife, now pregnant. However, he was hesitant to leave his mother and father. On a particular visit to his parents' home, his father showed him some marble carvings, rescued from a Nazi-destroyed synagogue, with a singular inscription of the fifth commandment, "Honor thy mother and father." Frankl let his visas expire in order to care for his elderly parents. Tilly ultimately was forced to have an abortion because Jewish women were not allowed to be pregnant. Shortly thereafter, Frankl and his family were forced to move to the Terezin ghetto, where he continued to work with suicidal patients, many of whom were the new and horrified detainees. Frankl spent a total of about 3 years in 4 camps. And I'm going to butcher this because I'm not German. I don't know how to say it exactly. Three instead, Auschwitz, Kaufering 3, and Turkheim. He lost his father in the Terezin ghetto, his brother and mother at Auschwitz, and his wife in the Bergen-Belsen concentration camp in the gas chamber. Upon his return to Vienna after liberation, he found nothing of his life left. The years spent in the camps deeply affected his understanding of reality and the meaning of human life. During his imprisonment, he found that those around him who did not lose their sense of purpose and meaning in life, irrespective of the circumstances, were able to survive much longer than those who had lost their way. Those who pinned hopes on external factors outside of their control did not survive. It's horrific to think about, but Frankl noticed that the death rate spiked between the week between Christmas and New Year's, and attributed it in part to the prisoners holding out arbitrary hope that they would be liberated by Christmas. And when the situation was clearly unchanged, they lost courage and hope, which in further consequence reduced their power of resistance and resiliency. Over a 9-day period in 1946, Frankl wrote Man's Search for Meaning. Actually, however, this was his second book. Frankl's first book, The Doctor and the Soul, was authored with a pencil stub on a few scraps of SS forms that a friend had pilfered from the camp guards. He credited this first manuscript for saving his life when he was sick with typhus. Writing it kept him awake so that he did not go into delirium and die. He unsuccessfully attempted to smuggle the manuscript out of the camps, and so rewrote it once freed. Man's Search for Meaning was written shortly thereafter. Man's Search for Meaning was initially published anonymously so that Frankl could write freely about the experience and suffering of the everyman in the camps, writing about both prisoners and their captors, and logotherapy. In fact, throughout Frankl's life, he did not focus on self-promotion. His philosophies were spread by colleagues, protégés, students, clients, and other admirers, and through his lectures. The English translation of Man's Search for Meaning was published in 1959 and became an international bestseller. In 1991, Man's Search for Meaning was listed as one of the 10 most influential books in the United States by the Library of Congress. Still today, decades later, it is recommended as one of Amazon's top 100 books to read in a lifetime. Over 16 million copies have been sold in over 50 languages to date. It continues to be considered one of the most relevant and influential works in existential psychology. Frankl often commented on the American obsession with the pursuit of happiness as stated in the Declaration of Independence. He saw it as a self-defeating goal. He believed that the role of psychotherapy was not to make people happy, but to enable them to deal with real life and its unavoidable troubles. According to Frankl, freedom requires responsibility. Otherwise, life threatens to degenerate into mere arbitrariness. He cautioned about the trends that he saw in modern psychotherapy, with its tendency to reduce an individual to nothing more than a victim of the influences of nature or nurture. This, he felt, stripped people from any freedom of choice or responsibility. Frankl also saw psychotherapy devolving into ready-made formulas rather than a vehicle that could encourage the patient toward their own deeply personal meaning. Calling for a rehumanization of psychotherapy, he emphasized the importance of reconnecting people and personal responsibility in order to overcome feelings of devaluation, meaninglessness, and despair, which produced anxiety, depression, addiction, and suicide. Through logotherapy, Frankl encouraged patients to focus on a way out and a way forward. Frankl shared his ideas with professionals and laypersons alike through his lectures and writings. Inspired by his ideas, logotherapy institutes were created around the globe, offering training, therapy, and research in meaning-centered psychotherapy. He and his second wife, Ellie, worked together on his 39 books. They had one daughter. In 1995, Frankl finished his autobiography, and in 1997, he published his final work, Man's Search for Ultimate Meaning. In this book, Frankl took a yet deeper exploration of the themes discussed in Man's Search for Meaning, as well as humankind's innate desire for inspiration and revelation. Believing that there is much more to our existence than meets the eye, Frankl said, quote, "No one will be able to make us believe that man is a sublimated animal once we can show him that within him there is a repressed angel," close quotes. Frankl died on September 2nd, 1997, at the age of 92. Frankl was a keen observer of human behavior and thought. I'd like to share 5 of his profound observations. Lesson 1, we always retain the ability to choose our attitudes. Frankl and his fellow prisoners had everything stripped from them: their families, friends, jobs, health, possessions, even their names and the hair on their bodies. But there is one thing that remained according to Frankl. An individual retains the ability to choose how to react to any given thought, emotion, or set of circumstances. Quote, "We who lived in concentration camps can remember the men who walked through the huts, comforting others, giving away their last piece of bread. They may have been few in number, but they offer sufficient proof that everything can be taken from a man but one thing, the last of human freedoms, to choose one's attitude in any given set of circumstances, to choose one's own way," close quotes. Lesson 2, there will be suffering. How we react to suffering is what counts. Frankl claimed that one finds meaning in life through 3 ways: through work, especially when that work is both creative in nature and aligned with a greater purpose; through love, which is often reflected by service to others; and through suffering, which is fundamental to the human experience. It is this third category that was put to the ultimate test through Frankl's experience in the concentration camps. Quote, "If there is a meaning in life at all, then there must be a meaning in suffering. Suffering is an ineradicable part of life, even as fate and death. Without suffering and death, human life cannot complete." Close quotes. The test for all of us is how we respond to the suffering in our lives. Quote, "The way in which a man accepts his fate and all the suffering it entails, the way in which he takes up his cross, gives him ample opportunity, even under the most difficult circumstances, to add a deeper meaning to his life." Close quotes. Lesson 3, the power of purpose. Frankl observed that those prisoners who survived the camp, who found a way to endure, often had a greater purpose that carried them onward through any difficult condition. For some, it was a child who was sheltered away in some distant country and who was waiting for their parent upon liberation. For others, it was a spouse or family member. Still for others, it was an unfinished task or creative work that required their unique contribution. Frankl and his friends were constantly on the watch for fellow prisoners who lost their purpose for life. Quote, "The prisoner who had lost faith in the future, his future, was doomed. With his loss of belief in the future, he also lost his spiritual hold. He let himself decline and become subject to mental and physical decay." Close quotes. Lesson 4, the true test of our character is revealed in how we act. Frankl concluded that there was no general answer to the meaning of life. Frankl thought that each person must answer the question for themselves. We can find our own unique meaning based on our circumstances, our relationships, and our experiences. Simply put, life tests our response to it. Quote, "We needed to stop asking about the meaning of life and instead think of ourselves as those who were being questioned by life, daily and hourly. Our answer must consist not in talk and meditation, but in right action and right conduct. Life ultimately means taking responsibility to find the right answers to its problems and to fulfill the tasks which it constantly sets for each individual." Close quotes. Lesson 5, human kindness can be found in the most surprising places. Frankl occasionally experienced startling moments of human kindness from guards, some of whom were conscripted themselves. These experiences, as recorded in Man's Search for Meaning and elsewhere, garnered Frankl considerable public criticism and ostracism at times, including from fellow survivors. For example, Frankl talks about a guard who, at great risk to himself, secretly gave him a piece of bread. Quote, "It was far more than the small piece of bread which moved me to tears at the time. It was the human something that this man gave me, the word and look which accompanied the gift." Close quotes. He also described incidents of unkind treatment of fellow detainees against one another. For example, Frankl shares that the senior prison warden, who was a prisoner himself, often beat fellow Jews at the slightest opportunity. Quote, "The mere knowledge that a man was either a camp guard or a prisoner tells us almost nothing. Human kindness can be found in all groups, even those which as a whole it would be easy to condemn." Close quotes. Frankl observed that there are really only two types of people: basically decent human beings and basically indecent human beings. But all human beings are complex. The decent and indecent can be found everywhere. They penetrate every group and every society. Quote, "Life in a concentration camp tore open the human soul and exposed its depths. Is it surprising that in those depths we again found human qualities which in their very nature were a mixture of good and evil?" Close quotes. A few more thoughts from Dr. Frankl. Man's Search for Meaning, though fairly short, is replete with statements and thoughts worthy of mention, discussion, and consideration. There just isn't time. I'd like to highlight quickly just a few more. Just listen. Just let them soak in, if you will. You can adapt and get used to literally any condition. Have courage to accept the things you can't control. The salvation of man is through love and in love. There is meaning in suffering. You can resist the influence of even the most toxic environments. Your actions are your own. Laughing and having a sense of humor will change the way you look at your life. Between stimulus and response, there is a space. In that space is our power to choose our response. In our response lies our growth and freedom. There is no need to be ashamed of tears, for tears bore witness that a man had the greatest of courage, the courage to suffer. When we are no longer able to change a situation, we are challenged to change ourselves. What is to give light must endure burning. In 1942, Albert Camus wrote, quote, "To decide whether life is worth living is to answer the fundamental question of philosophy. Everything else is child's play. We must first of all answer the question," close quotes. That same year, in 1942, Dr. Frankl, along with millions of other human beings, were taken to concentration camps and incarceration locations, some 44,000 sites, and denied the basic right to answer Camus' question, stripped of their freedom and robbed of life itself. Simultaneously, the United States was developing a new weapon, the atomic bomb, a weapon that led directly to the Cold War, and in so doing, also transformed and invigorated astronomy, cosmology, physics, and the space race of the 50s and 60s, resulting in a precipitously swift, radical, and continuing transformation of humankind's understanding of the universe, its immense size, and our increasingly insignificant footprint in it. Finally, also in 1942, in Oxford, a baby boy was born. His name was Stephen William Hawking. Dr. Hawking was destined to reshape scientific thinking concerning the universe. Most of you are familiar with Occam's razor. That is, that the simplest explanation is usually the right one. Occam's razor might lead to the conclusion that because we are so small, and increasingly so, and our existence so fleeting in comparison to time and space, that we couldn't possibly matter as individuals. But sometimes application of Occam's razor produces misleading results. You see, as our understanding of how grand the universe really is expands, so much rarer does every individual necessarily become as well. It's also very true, as a matter of objective observation, that the value or measured impact of something isn't always dependent upon it existing in perpetuity or being very large, or even that its value or impact is realized immediately. Lots of times, it's just the opposite. Think of the value of the fission of atoms for nuclear energy, or the profound ideas contained in a little book. Imagine Frankl, so very small, powerless and imprisoned, wholly and utterly alone and exposed, on a bunk in a Nazi concentration camp, starved, freezing, traumatized, with his family murdered, and he too repeatedly tortured and likely to die a horrible death, looking up to the heavens and asking the same question posed to and answered by Aristotle, Schopenhauer, Kierkegaard, Nietzsche, Tolstoy, Freud, and others, namely, what is the meaning of life? And for his 92 years, as the universe grew bigger and more complex with advancements in science, and we as individuals got smaller and perhaps a bit more uncivilized, Frankl, without a single shred of wistful, Pollyannish thinking or flimsy positive affirmation, and instead, with a virtually unimaginable degree of tragic optimism, made wholly credible by his experiences in the camps, consistently and confidently answered, for 9 decades, the meaning of life is to give life meaning. I think Frankl got the answer right, and because I can, I choose not to believe otherwise. And so, my dear questers and guests, as our wonderful 2023-2024 season closes, and oh, have we not all learned so much this season? I urge each of you to make meaning your personal quest in this vast and amazing, and sometimes intractable and brutal universe. Thank you.